Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Let's solve this problem today. It's a very simple problem, but it is used commonly in interviews to weed out candidates. Um, so let's see how to solve this. Before we solve this together, I want you to pause the video and try to solve this on your own. Uh, like it doesn't matter if you have a previous programming experience or problem solving experience. You don't have to have anything. Just try to solve the problem on your own. Grab a piece of paper and pencil and try. Give it a genuine attempt. When you're ready, you can unpause. Okay, so now we can try to solve this problem by breaking it into a few simple steps. First, let's try to understand the problem by restating the problem in our own words. Okay, um, so what is the problem? We have to print the numbers from 1 to 100. And if that number is divisible by 3, we have to print fizz. If it is divisible by 5, we have to print the string bus. If it is divisible by both, we have to print fizz bus. Otherwise, just print the number. Okay? Sure. Yeah, it helps me to understand the problem better if I just read it out aloud. Okay. Um, Okay, so let's try to solve this problem now. Before solving this problem, let's try to come up with some examples. Okay, so okay, so this is the problem, right? Like we have numbers iterating from 1 to 100, right? So for each of the number, we have to see whether it falls under the four cases that's mentioned. So in this case, 1 is not divisible by 3 or 5. So I should just print 1. For 2, it is not divisible by 3 or 5 or both. So I should just print 2. 2 is divisible by 3. So I would print, 3 is divisible by 3. So I would print fifth. 4 is not divisible by 3 or 5. So we'll just print 4. 5 is divisible by 5, but not 3. So we would print bus. 6 is divisible by 3, but not 5. So we would print this. So you get the idea. So for this, I would print 7 and then goes on. For this, I would print buzz, goes on until we come here. 15 is a special case that is both divisible by 3 and 5. So we need to print this bus. And it just goes on, right? So, so here we have identified like different cases. One is the number. If it is not divisible by either 5 or 3, we can take one example for that. Maybe we can just pick 2 as an example that we will use to test our approach. So for 3, we can use 6, the number that is divisible only by 3. We can either use 6 or 3. We can just pick 3, okay? So this is the example, one case, second case. For a number that is only divisible by 5, we can either pick 5 or 10. We'll just pick 5, okay? So the fourth case is the number that is divisible by both 3 and 5. So we can pick 15. Okay. So these are the four distinct cases, and I pick one example each for all the cases. Okay. So let's write that down. Okay. So I've written different examples here, right, for all the different cases that you have found. So it's important to have an example that is simpler to work with. Okay. So now let's try to figure out the high-level approach. And let's just talk in plain English and try to come up with a high-level approach. It doesn't matter if you don't have any programming experience, you don't know any coding language. you can still attempt to solve this problem. Okay. So problem solving is a totally different skill that can be nurtured and honed over time, along with your coding skills. Both can be done together. Okay, so let's see. So let's try to solve this problem again. Let's just restate it again. So we have to find whether a number is divisible by 3 or 5 or both or none. So how can we find whether a number is divisible by another number? So if a number 6 is divisible by 3, what is the property? So the quotient of this operation should be 2, but the remainder of the operation is 0. Similarly, if you have 9, the quotient should be 3 and the remainder should be 0. For 15, if you try to see if it is divisible by 5, the quotient should be 3 and the remainder should be 0. So if a number is perfectly divisible by another number, the remainder is 0. Is this always true? Let's try for a number that is not divisible by a number. Okay, 7 by 3. You would get the quotient to be still 2, but the remainder here is 1. So this proves that for a number to be divisible by another number, the remainder has to be 0. If not, then we can conclude that this number is not divisible by this number. So how can we do this programmatically? Almost all languages has this operator called modulo. So this exactly gives you the remainder. A division operator gives you the quotient, right? So the modulo operator gives you the remainder. So this is the operator that we need for our problem. It's called as modulo, right? So now the next step is to check whether a number is actually uh, divisible by this. If true, then we have to do some operation. Else, we have to do some other operation. So how can we achieve this? We can use an if statement. If some condition is true, you do something, else you do something else. This is if the condition is false. Okay, so now we have some tools that we can use. Let's attempt to solve this problem with these tools. Okay, so let's write a high-level approach to solve this problem. So let's loop through numbers from I 1 to 100. So this is a for loop construct that is available in all programming languages. So it helps us to loop through numbers from within a range. So for each of the I value, we need to check whether I is divisible by 3 or 5 or both. So let's do that. If I is divisible by 3, the remainder should be 0. We need to print this. Else, if I is divisible by 5, we need to print bus. Else, if I is divisible by both and I divisible by 5, we need to print this bus. If none of this is true, we need to just print the number as is. So we have just translated what we said in English just to plain pseudocode, right? So let's try to evaluate if our code is correct, okay? So let's try to evaluate with simple examples, the examples that we have identified. So for 3. So for 3, when I is 3, 3 is divisible by 3. The remainder will be 0. So we will print fizz. right? This condition will not get executed, this condition will not get executed, this condition will not get executed because these are all in else if. So for 3, we are getting fizz, which is the expected output. For 5, let's evaluate this. When I is 5, let's act as the debugger and try to do what the debugger would do, right? So just based on the code that we have written here. So for 5, 5 is not divisible by 3, so we will not go into this condition. We will come to this statement. Is 5 divisible by 5? Of course it is. So we will print buzz. So the other condition will not get executed because it is under else. And we will just exit the for loop. So for 5 also, we are doing the right thing here. So does this mean our code is completely correct? Not until we have exhausted all the test cases or the examples that we have identified. So let's see, evaluate this for 15. So 15 is divisible by 3. So we would print this. We are not going to go into any other conditions because these are all under else, right? So is this output correct for 15? Not really, right? So we have to get FizzBuzz, but we only got fizz. So our code fails for 15. Okay, so now we have a problem. We have to fix it. Let's see how to fix this problem. Okay, so let's try to get to the crux of the problem here. So we have numbers ranging from 1 to 100, and when you look at the space of these numbers, we can divide this into these categories. One is we have all the numbers that are divisible by 3, like 3, 6, 9, etc. And all the numbers that are divisible by 5, like 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, etc. And numbers that are divisible by both 3 and 5, like 15, 30, 45, etc. So do you see these two sets overlap here? So this number, this range, the shaded region, belongs to both numbers divisible by 3 and numbers divisible by 5. And all the space outside represents number that is not divisible by 3 or 5, like 2, 7, etc. Right? So the problem with our approach before was we are trying to filter out the numbers 15, 45, this case, right? So when we have the first condition as this, obviously 15 is going to go under this because this condition includes this condition. So what are the other options? So can we have this as our first condition? It's going to again have the same problem. It would just print buzz and we will not be getting FizzBuzz. So the other solution option is to have this condition as the first condition, like a first filter. So in this case, if you do that, 15 would be handled separately and we would get FizzBuzz. So let's try to code that up. Okay, so I have coded up what we discussed before, right? So for 15 now, let's try to evaluate. 15 comes in. The first condition gets evaluated because we moved the filter to the top. So this 15 is divisible by 3, yes, and 15 is also divisible by 5 since we have an and condition, and since both these statements are true, this is going to get printed. This bus. Okay, so this is true. And none of the other statements are going to get executed for 15 because they are all in else part. So now let's try to evaluate for 2. 2 does not fall under this condition because it's not divisible by 3 or 5. Same here. Same here. So it is going to come here and just print the number 2. This is correct. So let's just walk through 3 and 5 one more time because we evaluated 3 and 5 when our code was a little different. Now the code is different than before. So let's try to make sure our code still satisfies these two cases. Okay. So for 3, 3 is divisible by 3, but it's not divisible by 5. So we are not going to go into this. That's good. 3 is divisible by 3, so we will print fizz. So we will not go into any other statement. Good. We are still satisfying this example. For 5 again, we're going to come here. 5 is divisible by, is it divisible by 3? No, 5 is not divisible by 3. So we are not even going to evaluate this statement. The debugger is not even going to evaluate this statement. And we will not print FizzBuzz. Instead, we will go here, check 5 is divisible by 3. It is not. Is 5 divisible by 5? Yes. So we would print buzz. So that is it. We have satisfied all the examples that we have identified so far. So it is very important to think about all the different cases and choose a simple example for different cases because we saw how the code, even if it works for one case, it can be it can not work for another case. So in which case our code is not completely correct. So it's very important to identify all the different cases of our inputs. So this is a problem, and this is the pseudocode like we have come up with. So as you see, like to solve this problem, you don't need to have, you don't need to know the syntax of any coding language. So now that you have solved this problem and you know that this approach works and this code is correct, it is just a job of mere transcription to change this from the pseudocode to a working code. So you can look up, Google search, all the different constructs that you've used here, like for loop, if condition, modulo, printing a string, printing the variable separately for your programming language, and try to translate this pseudocode into your programming language. So you can look at problem solving in this two-step approach. You can always try to just solve the problem, identify the simple examples and run it through. Be sure about the logic and then translate it to your code, your preferred coding language. I hope you enjoyed solving this problem. I highly recommend that you give it a try and you translate this into your programming language. That way, you will hone both your problem solving skills and your coding skills in parallel. Thank you.